Hello and welcome to Unwatchables, the people's podcast where you have nothing to lose but your chains and sometimes your lunch. I am Marc Dottavio.
Viva la Seth Troyer.
And today we are joined by cartoonist Nathan Gelgud to tackle the most polarizing and some might say unwatchable period of a legendary filmmaker's career. Jean-Luc Godard was one of the leading figures of the French New Wave, at least until he abandoned narrative filmmaking for experimental political films, alienating much of his audience in the process. We will be looking at two films from this most controversial of eras, 1967's Maoist docu-fiction La Chinoise and 1969's avant-garde documentary British Sounds. And maybe I will settle on the pronunciation of La Chinoise. Will come more naturally to me as we go on.
Or British.
Yeah, that one was easy. But the expert here to guide us through this journey is Nathan Gelgud. He has been a projectionist, a video store clerk, and a film critic. Now he makes comics about the arts for New York Times and Hyperallergenic. His book, a collection of his absurdist comic strip, Real Politic, is out now. And it is very funny, very enjoyable, especially for the cinematically inclined. So Nathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much.
And I understand right now you're kind of out on a tour.
I'm on tour. We kicked off in Los Angeles, which is where I live, at Secret Headquarters, the great comic book store there. And then on Friday, 2 days ago, I introduced the De Palma movie Hi Mom and Godard's La Chinoise at the Metrograph. And yesterday, I signed books at the great comic book store in Brooklyn, Desert Island. And now, after I get done talking to you guys, I'm on a little break for a few days back home in New York. And then I'll go to Chicago. I'll be at the Block Museum introducing Putney Swope. And I'll be in Montreal at Cinema Moderne introducing Putney Swope, also Putney Swope.
All right, fun.
Yeah, and I just want to be like, you introduced me as today's expert. I'm not sure how much I can claim that mantle. I think I'm more of a dilettante, but I do love these movies, and I do, I am excited to talk about them. But I want to, I want to talk about the act of viewing them and how you guys felt about them, and I just want to. I don't want to try to educate anybody.
Sure, and well, I think you'll be the expert at least compared to us in this conversation. You'll be the expert.
All right, fair.
I might be a little more in the middle ground in that I think, like most people, all of his movies that I've seen have been from the 60s. And I've seen almost all of those and love quite a few of them.
Yeah.
I definitely have been one of those people who was a little bit afraid to go past that point just based on what I've heard. I kind of have always stopped at Weekend, basically, which I think is kind of like the common point, which I didn't realize was actually right after La Chinoise. I thought maybe that was right before, but they're very close.
You're forgiven for not knowing. I mean, he was making two movies a year.
Right. And it's crazy how much he crammed into that 6 to 7 year period. So even if you're one of those people who's kind of totally off the boat after that, I mean, few directors in their whole careers cram that much innovation and classic movies into such a small period of time there. Even if you're, perhaps the dilettante who is only into, the more well-known French New Wave films.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're right. Maybe, for a long time, you could say that the reason it made sense to kind of stop as a viewer after the 67 movies is because you couldn't see the next ones. You couldn't, the ones that, just for the listener, after Godard made Weekend, he apparently, this is in the biographies, I think, told the cast and the crew, many of whom had been working on all the New Wave movies, or many of them, he told them all to he was that's go find work, because I'm done with you guys. I'm going to do something different now. And what he did was he teamed up with this film critic and I think Maoist at the time, Jean-Pierre Gorin, and they made a series of sort of essay films about revolutionary politics. And they were deconstructing the idea of what a movie is, which of course, like, he was already doing, like since his first movie, since Breathless, he was doing that. So it's fun. It's interesting. Sorry, I'm all over the map a little bit, but it's interesting to think about how there's like, we think of this breaking point, right? Like that, like he tells the crew, like, go off and find work. And then he made this totally different kind of thing. And I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that's a good way to view his career. I think that the movies are all on a continuum. And I think that you can definitely see, if you watch La Chinoise in succession with Weekend and then movies like Wind from the East and British Sounds and Vladimir and Rosa up to Tout va bien, they function as their own group of movies. So I guess I'm just kind of here to encourage people to tackle these movies. And forgive is the wrong word, but like I get it, because I get why these movies are overlooked, because the two big biographies by McCabe and by Brody are also pretty dismissive of these movies. If you read the chapters on these movies, they're not that interested in them. Whereas like in other parts of the biography, a movie will get a whole chapter,
I imagine what is like the detractor or distractor really is the fact that it's so in your face every minute by minute about communism and politics, which I think, especially at the time, it must have felt jarring for. I mean, the experimental film conventions are there in the films before, but what gets lost, I guess, is the like what maybe you would get used to going to Godard for, or if you know him in a cursory way, like I did, just like, well, there's the girl, and like, aren't we gonna, there's where's the gun, and where's the
right.
it does show up eventually, but you have to wade through a lot of what. In this one, even, it's not a documentary. The second one we're going to talk about is a documentary, but at certain points, it almost feels like an intentional way, like a sort of staged documentary. At certain points, it feels people giving monologues, people giving like talks about communism, and you're never sure who's an actor. Like, if anything, I was surprised to find out who was an actor here.
Yeah,
because they seem so encyclopedic,
Yeah, but the same thing is happening in La Chinoise in a way, because a lot of those, some of those characters are actors, and then there's also N.Y. Azemski, who so La Chinoise is the first movie that Godard made with N.Y. Azemski, who he made who he continued to make movies with during what's called the Ziga Vertov group period,
and they were married at the time, right?
And she was studying. I hope I'm getting all this right. If I'm not, I'm getting the spirit of it right. She was studying at Nanterre, which was a school that was kind of like in the outside of Paris, kind of in this undeveloped zone. And at Nanterre, this like swell of students started getting really interested in Maoism. And they were studying, I think, with Althusser, who was doing close readings of Marx. And this became sort of a philosophical movement of students who were interested in a new version of communism that was opposed to the mainstream communism of France. Because, like the Communist Party was a political party in France. So this was like a new strain of radical politics that was developing at this school, and Godard would go there to pick her up. And that's how he started meeting and seeing all this happening. And just the same way that he may have seen the same way he might have observed anything. He saw this happening, and so he thought, well, maybe I should make a movie about this. And he did get interested in their politics and engage in their politics. But the genesis of this movie was via Wyazemski, which is another way that you could kind of reorganize his career to say like, well, in La Chinoise, he started making movies with Anne Wyazemski because he met her. And you know what I'm saying? So that's like a different a way of framing his career. You know what I mean? Like La Chinoise is the beginning of a new period in a way, and you could call them the Wyazemski movies because she's in a lot of the sort of didactic essay movies.
Yeah, it's just like you were saying, a lot of this stuff was present in the previous movies. It's just a lot denser here and a lot more upfront. Where
in British Sounds,
even in La Chinoise,
right.
You know, those earlier films that came right before that, you know, there were still definitely, you know, political overtones to a lot of them. Definitely, he was toying with film conventions at that point. I mean, to the point where a lot of people today maybe would even look at that initial period as being too experimental or pretentious or off-putting, where, I mean, I think they're very playful and funny and definitely don't deserve that kind of a label. But it is interesting that when it comes to Godard, you know, a lot of other film movements and innovations that have been so thoroughly absorbed into filmmaking now, where you kind of have to remind younger viewers, like, you know, at the time, this was actually really new and innovative. But with Godard, I watch those movies, I need to get back into that headspace, and it kind of helps for me to watch a lot of them together, because I feel like we haven't really absorbed this kind of stuff that he was doing, even in his most popular movies. Like, it's still not normal today to have music on the soundtrack kind of start and stop randomly, or to disrupt continuity editing, or
leaving in flubbed lines.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like it was stuff that was so kind of counterintuitive that it's not something that we would even recognize today, like, you know, all these years later, absorbed into other movies.
And there was a thing that he was doing, like in Masculine Feminine, where he was interviewing characters, where Godard was off screen and he was interviewing them, and they were talking about, in that movie, they're talking about like kind of youth and pop culture and dating, if I remember right. And then in La Chinoise, he does the same thing, but he's interviewing them about like Maoism and revolutionary politics. And also, like, La Chinoise is like, I think it's doing a lot of the same things that he would continue to do in the later period. But it's a very pretty movie. It looks really nice in a way that the other ones maybe don't. Like, it looks conventionally nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Even if they are speaking in a real dry sort of way, or maybe you're zoning out about some of the politics, there is a artifice going on to some of the rooms are curated that they're in. They are set up like you know, it's a film going on here.
Yeah.
It's not just total documentary.
And the actors are incredibly good looking, and the clothes are cool, and like so I understand it still has that, what we think of as a sort of new wave aesthetic or fashion sense, even, like, you know what I mean? Like, it looks cool in a way that maybe he deliberately stopped, a thing that he deliberately stopped doing after that.
Yeah, well, I could also see that being sort of a point of criticism or confusion, being this sort of like, who's this like hot model girl talking to me about communism? It is like this sort of like unexpected, weird, like, who is this person? Which it was like something.
Except that she really was. Wyazemski was fluent in that language,
which I figured she had to be. Yeah. Some of these are clearly scripted, and other ones it's going off script. There's no way. Like, it's just so encyclopedic about these things. And I mean, the sort of romance going on between Godard and her being at sort of the folk, like the center of this, and like sort of the instigating factor, I think could be the real way in, even though you'd probably have to like do some research to find that out. But it is kind of like your way in for me, which I didn't know necessarily when I was watching it, but I kind of felt that like there is sort of a distance going on here, as much as it is so like on fire about these ideas and it's so central and everything. there is like a distance of like a fly on a wall kind of feeling of Godard.
And I think that's
sort of
important.
like, what is this? What is it? Almost reminds me of Zabriskie Point has this kind of feeling with Antonioni being like, what are these hippie kids all about? I'm like, as much as this is like, he's sort of on one end trying to like make this defining generational thing, but he's also like understanding like he's kind of an alien to this whole thing. And I think if you are also more than likely kind of an alien to this sort of thing, that's sort of your way in. It's okay to be feeling that way, I think.
Yeah, and he does the thing where when the revolutionary students set up a sort of classroom setting in the big living room where one will be at a table sort of lecturing the others, he puts the camera out on the balcony and he's moving it across the window. You know what I mean? Like you kind of peek at the characters. Like he moves
like, you guys go, and he's
I'm out here. I'm literally out here outside of the circle, and I'm moving. And I'm doing a thing to make. I think it's just a fairly simple but effective Brechtian technique of just moving the camera back and forth, which is not unique to this movie. He does it in the earlier stuff too. And I find it's exactly what you were saying, Seth. It gives you a feeling of that he's observing this rather than being of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at the movie as a whole. And just for anyone listening, maybe who's not as well versed in Godard's career and everything, I would like to kind of define exactly why we chose this movie to talk about. So just for a little background, this is from 1967. La Chinoise is French for the Chinese, and I guess it does have a long technically title, which is The Chinese, or rather In the Chinese Manner, a film in the making. Which kind of gives you this idea. There is almost a feeling of ramshackleness or incompleteness, like he's exploring around in this, maybe a little more even than his other movies. But Nathan, you thought this would be a good kind of entry point into what is considered his more obscure or incomprehensible, if we're being not, ungenerous or pedantic, period. Those are the words that get thrown around for people who are more critical of that era, even who are fans of him.
And it's also the other reason that I picked it is because part of the reason for me being here is that with my book being out, Realpolitik, the collection of comic strips, I took a lot from La Chinoise. So
reading it, I could totally tell, like, wow, this matches perfectly with what we're talking about.
Yeah. So the book is about a group of cinema workers who work in a small, like a single screen movie theater, and they take over the theater in an attempt to launch a Marxist-Leninist revolution via the act of film exhibition. It also has science fictional elements and fantasy stuff in there. And it ends up being, it goes from sort of what you could call like a workplace comedy to a sort of absurdist satire of radical politics and cinephilia and the way in which those things are contradictory or maybe not contradictory, and the character's attempts to synthesize those two tendencies. And so it winds up being a thing about characters with revolutionary politics in an enclosed space talking about how to take action, which is what La Chinoise is. La Chinoise starts with a sort of loose voiceover where you learn that somebody's out of town. If you watch really closely, you can figure it out. But basically, one of the main character's cousins' parents has this nice apartment, and they've gone away for a while on vacation. And the cousin has allowed her cousin, who is maybe Anne Wyazemski's character, to stay there. And Wyazemski's character opens up the apartment to her comrades so that they can have this revolutionary cell headquarters. And they write slogans all over the walls, and they replace all the books with Mao's Little Red Book, and they have classes there, and they plot, and eventually they plot terrorist action.
I could have used you during the watching. That was helpful. Because from the get-go, it really felt like it was like, this is just going to be an experimental film. But it's slowly, I was picking up on, I think I was just like psyched out at a certain point where I was like, I don't need to be paying attention to necessarily plot details.
No.
And then midway through, it does start to like gather speed in like a plot sort of way.
Which is also,
I was interested if there was more. I was interested about that if there was more that I was missing at the beginning. So okay. So there's an apartment. I was wondering about whose apartment this was. It was too nice for these kids to have.
It gives that I think there's also something in comic strips in that way, and with my comic strips in that way, in that there are these isolated scenes. So like Real Politic was a comic that I'm still doing, but for 1 year I did it every day. And the book collects like the first few months of those strips. And in doing it every day, sometimes I'll just do an isolated joke where the joke is just, you can read this strip, you can have never seen these characters before, and you can read this strip and process, oh, that's a joke. Even if you don't think it's funny, you understand it was supposed to be funny, and you understand like what the joke is. But then there's other times where the strips will start to be little story, like a story, where it would be helpful to know what came before, and you're reading like a collection of like 5 or 6 strips, or even sometimes more, like 10 or 15 strips that tell a little mini story. And that does start to happen in La Chinoise, where it is like isolated scenes, like, oh, this is a lecture, this is characters acting out the conflict in Vietnam, this is a theory, a conversation about theory, this is 2 characters who have a romance breaking up. And but then it starts to build to a thing where, do we try not to spoilers? I don't even know if it would count as a spoiler to like
that's
talk
out
about.
the window.
Okay.
I don't think you're making anybody cry with this one.
Until it builds to where, and I think we should talk about this, like, so about 2/3 into the movie, they take a vote. The group takes a vote whether to go in the direction of taking leftist terrorist action. And they all vote in favor of it, except for one guy, the guy in the yellow sweater, who thinks that's not the way to go. And then at the end of the movie, they commit a murder that we don't see, but we see the outside of the. So the 2 characters pull up to. I'm just going to kind of say, because I think we should talk about it. But so the 2 characters pull up at a hotel. The YSMC character goes into the hotel to assassinate the reactionary who they've deemed worthy of assassination. She comes back. We don't see her. We stay in the car, I think. Do I remember this right? Like,
I think
we
so.
stay
we
at least stay outside the hotel, and maybe just in the car watching the driver just wait for her to get back, which is that's a really funny thing to do, and also really tense, and she comes back and she goes like, oh shit, or something. And she realizes that she's inverted the numbers of the hotel room of the person who she was supposed to kill. And she realizes she went to the wrong room and killed the wrong person. And they're like, all right, well, go back in.
Get the right one.
And I think that there was, that was, so of course, a movie like this, like the actual Maoists hated it because they thought they were being made fun of, and people who were more bourgeois or middle class, or even, progressive or whatever, but not as severe as this, thought it was advocating for terrorism. So it's like, he pleased no one. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why, is because the culminating act, they kind of fumble it, but I think that underlines another thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is that when you read about revolutionary groups like the Black Panthers or the Weather Underground, or groups like this in May '68, you realize how young they were. Like when I started getting into this stuff as a teenager, of course, I wasn't thinking about these people as incredibly young, But what I've realized is like, oh yeah, like a lot of these people throughout history, this stuff is all very fresh to them. Like they just encountered this stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they're all of a sudden ready to like take action.
Well, that's a big part
but
of
they're
this.
not.
Yeah, like, and maybe
They're-
that's that distance
yeah.
that we have from Godard's perspective. Is a lot of this I was wondering, is this mocking these kids? Because so much of what they are doing is ineffectual, or the way that they're approaching these ideas is very strident, and they feel very cloistered from the outside world, you know?
Yeah.
Like they don't have this real world experience. And I think, I mean, he's very overtly at certain points poking holes in that, like when Zemski actually sits down with is his name Francis Johnson or
that's what the scene I wanted to talk about next. So yeah, go ahead.
where he's
That,
like
woke me
directly
up.
getting
That
into a
was so
conversation
needed.
where he's like deconstructing her points or criticizing, you know, her pretty simplistic ideas about violent revolution and what are you actually going to do in the aftermath. So he is definitely like directly critiquing that stuff, but at the same time, it does feel like his heart is still in all of this stuff. Like he is with them.
Mhm.
That tension there is probably one of the most interesting things about the movie. Like it wouldn't be nearly as interesting if this was just him and the characters lecturing us and each other about these things. Like it really seems like they're grappling with them in a way they don't fully understand at this
Mhm.
point. Which
I think
Micah
is
does
the
in
fake
himself.
out. Yeah. It's like
What's
a
that?
fake out at first, I think, which for me at least it was a fake out because I was kind of like, I hate this. I think this is like
Mhm.
so grating and so preachy and gradually, yeah, you get little hints, visual hints, the feeling of distance from Godard. And maybe there is some sort of like taking this with a grain of salt. And then it is like that point where finally someone actually comes in and questions them for
Mhm.
once and like kind of very quickly pokes a lot of holes in like the actual boots on the ground action that they're talking about versus like the whole like yes it's fun to talk to each other in fancy rooms but actually doing this stuff is another thing. And it is kind of like if you can hang with it and kind of like I could imagine someone turning this off just after 20 minutes realize like thinking that they understand what's going on, which
Mhm.
is not the case. I think there is a lot more going on than just being like a preachy advocation for this sort of thing.
Mhm. Right. However, I think that I think personally think this, and I also think in the world of the movie that professor on the train is wrong. And so the scene is
He's a real guy, right? This is a real activist.
He was
right?
Anwai Zemski's professor.
Okay.
So she's actually that character is talking to her old professor, and it's Anwai Zemski, the actress, talking to her actual professor. And interestingly, she's wearing an earpiece, and Godard is dictating her dialogue.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow. There's
Yes.
a whole other layer.
See, that's
Yes.
the one I figured it had to be her just speaking off the cuff.
And I was just talking to my friend because my friend Jess went to see it at the Metrograph, and we were talking about it the next day, and she was like, "Well, that's kind of weird that he would do." Because she could hold her own in that conversation without him dictating it. And my idea was that, yes, she could, but he needed to put words in her mouth that were more provocative, perhaps, than what she would have said, because he needed to, he needs to push the professor a little bit. He needs to poke the professor a little bit in a way that if someone who's of that group might be more defensive and might want to be more convincing. And Godard doesn't want the dialogue to be convincing. He wants it to be provocative. Okay. And if you watch it closely, and what happened is I was doing a comic. I was kind of doing a comic about it, and I was transcribing the dialogue. And what I realized, okay, so Zemski basically, the Zemski character says, what we're going to do is like bomb the Sorbonne. You know, we're going to start planting bombs. That's how we're going to start a revolution. And the professor's just going like, what? But that's not, what is that going to communicate? And she says, but you defended that, which is true. That guy, he advocated on behalf of Algerian terrorists who are anti-colonialism and helped set up and run a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an asylum, a place for them to go safely, to escape prosecution. During the Algerian uprising that drove France out of Algeria. And she's saying, you defended these actions when it was in Algeria? Why is it not okay for me to do this? And if you really break apart his answer is essentially because when I did it, those ideas were popular. And what you're advocating for is not popular enough yet. And that's not a good argument. It's not a good argument to say your philosophy doesn't make sense because it's not popular enough. But that's really the core of his argument. You can't do this because you don't have enough support. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I'm
sorry, but just to finish the thought.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly important that in the scene he's writing backwards and she's writing forwards.
Oh, no. There you go.
Yeah, that's something definitely. I'm sure that it didn't escape Godard's notice.
It's entirely on purpose
for sure.
I mean, whether it's on purpose or not is almost immaterial, but it affects the way that the scene reads. So I think that that's not to say that I think that the movie is simple. Just like you guys were both saying, the movie is not simplistically saying, obviously the next step is we start bombing things. That's not what it's saying at all. What it's saying, and also what I think the characters in my book, in a more, sort of absurdist, cartoony way, are investigating is, why is political violence so out of hand dismissed? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it just like, it's just a non-starter in conversations with people, the idea of radical political violence. And I'm not even sure what I believe, but I definitely don't believe that it's just obviously not the way to go. You know what I mean?
Well, and it doesn't feel like the movie really lands, in a definitive way on one side or the other, because this is shortly before, a pretty bungled assassination attempt, after. I believe this happens right before that. So it definitely kind of doesn't land in a definitive place.
It seems to land in just a realistic place where it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's like you have like, as a group of 10 of you or something, and you're just these kids, and you're going to probably botch an assassination attempt like you are. You're intellectuals, you're students, and maybe you're not soldiers necessarily is like the real thing. That is just like, even just in like a basic sense of like organization and handling like violence under pressure. That's a totally different skill than being able to sort out all these Leninist ideas in a room. Yeah.
Yeah. What she even says in the beginning of the movie, and I think it's in one of those kind of interview scenes where she's talking probably to Godard off screen, she's saying that what I'm doing right now is studying theory and philosophy in order to determine the next course of action. And then she kind of concludes that idea where she says, I'm in the philosophy class, meaning like there's the labor class, perhaps there's the labor class and there's the philosophy class, which of course, like, that's another thing that's like thrown around as a criticism of student radicals, is like, you're not even in the working class. Like, you're not of the workers. This thing that you're talking about, that you're not the proletariat. You don't even spend time with the proletariat, which I think is like a reasonable idea to engage with, but I also think it's a specious argument. But she self-identifies as someone who's in the philosophy class of the movement. And so you could maybe say that the character is established as somebody who wants to study in order to determine what political action to take. And maybe it's just a little too rushed.
Yeah. I mean, she winds up striking me, or a lot of the kids, and maybe it's just my own bias. A lot of this is sort of, in hindsight, a lot of it is just so, I don't know, this sort of, it's hard not to use adjectives without insulting it, but it feels performative. Some of the performative, like, intellectualism, the way of, like, it was very naughty of you to be doing this at this time or something. It's hard not to think about that aspect. It still feels like it's in leftist circles now sometimes, of this sort of, I can't help but kind of sense that in some circles that I'm in sometimes, where it's just like, it's just kind of fun for you, and it's fun for you to say we're gonna go, like, I don't know, blow up this building about this or something. But throughout the movie, I found it grating for that. That's like another level of difficulty for me in this movie, I think, is sort of like taking these kids seriously or not, whether or not you do, which from the get-go I kind of don't. I'm like suspicious for those reasons of them being like, what life experiences have they had, and like also they're just in somebody else's apartment. It's not even their apartment. Like they have all this time.
I'm interested in that too, though. Like the apartment is an important part of the movie because it had me thinking about the importance, especially before the internet, of physical space, and of that they had to have like this. The theory that they're throwing around and the actions that they choose to take are all very tied to this physical space that they gather in. You know what I mean? Does this make sense? In a way that perhaps we would just trade ideas virtually now. You know what I mean? Like,
they have a headquarters.
They don't have a comment section. They need an apartment to be in together. Marc, what did you think of? Yeah. Where were you at with just kind of your relationship with the characters?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that how slowly this stuff kind of emerges, because I almost feel like if someone hadn't seen the movie and we're just hearing us talk about it, we're almost making it sound more conventional or like conventionally dramatic than it is, because like Seth has been saying, you know, it starts out so much as this barrage of slogans and images from comic books. There's almost this pop art kind of sensibility going on. And, you know, so much of these students, you know, reciting texts, having dialogues with each other. Sometimes they're having kind of interviews with the camera who we then see. Like there's a shot where, at least one shot where we see the cameraman that they're talking to.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's literally didactic. And I think as the movie goes on and you do start to get details like, okay, these are characters, like these two are in a relationship. This one acknowledges having like bankers in her family. And then when we get towards the very end, there actually is a kind of action, you know, that happens with the stuff we've been talking about. And it's like I do think that stuff is serving a purpose, because I could see the off-putting part is like, who wants to sit for this long and just watch people talking and talking and talking about Maoism and revolution and political theory, as opposed to actually, you know, seeing these things in practice. But the movie itself does seem to be...
I want to watch that.
Right, sure. Maybe the appeal won't be as widespread.
How many movies are people sitting around talking about inane subjects? You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's like, just replace Maoism with like talking about like whether like a romance, like, you know what I'm saying? Like a wedding, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Sure.
There's not even like a cutaway here. It's like no silence. It feels like they are never not speaking. I feel like this was like a window into what it must be like to be my dad watching like a foreign film, where he's always like, I don't want to read a movie, you know. But this is like this is like now level 10. Square. Like they are never not speaking in like full chunk paragraphs going at you at every single second.
But I think it turns out that the movie is about talking about these things as opposed to the things themselves. And that's going to be my entry point, where I'm going to be a little more interested in like how these ideas are filtered through the people that we're seeing on screen, and how the limitations of just talking about things. So that was the kind of what saved this for me, where I was a little with Seth at first, where it's like a little of this thing goes a long way. You know, this is a normal like feature length film. And the more that it kind of it complicates things more than that, and you see that there's a little more going on, is basically, I found this a lot more watchable than I was expecting it to be. And not just because of the, you know, there being an element of plot and characters, but just visually, this is as like playful as almost all of his other films from this period. We got the horizontal tracking shot you were talking about, the clips, you know, the shots of the comic books and the room that they're painting with slogans and stuff like that. And there is just a goofiness to it. You know, the cast is very appealing. Jean-Pierre Léaud, or however you say his name, who's been in other Godard films and lots of French New Wave films, has this impish kind of, you know, charm to him. There's that scene where he keeps putting on like the sunglasses with the different countries' flags on them, and they get up in the morning and they like exercise to slogans. You got that Mao pop song that keeps playing.
Oh my god, that noise!
It keeps this energy going, and But I do think that when it gets towards the later going, like, to me, her just have like Veronique or whatever her name is, just having a conversation with a guy who's just, criticizing her points, isn't quite
the professor on the train. Is that what
yeah. Like, that's a little less compelling to me than if that was being actually illustrated somehow. Like, I could imagine a kind of more conventional movie that with the bungled assassination attempt, maybe we were involved in it a little bit more. I can imagine like a dark comedy kind of thing going on there.
I mean, I think it's important though that you don't see it, because I think that I hate to use this example, but it's the one that comes to mind. It's like the Reservoir Dogs thing where it's like Tarantino realized that he needed to not show the ear get cut off because that's scarier, because whatever you're imagining is happening is going to be more upsetting than what he could accomplish by showing it to you. And I think that there's something going on with that, which is there's a similar thing going on in La Chinoise where when I am, okay, let's say we watched Anne Wyazemski go in the hotel room, look for the room number, walk down the hall with her gun. I mean, it would be cool as shit. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, is that what you're arguing, Mark? Or is it more that the like argument that the guy is bringing in is like too little too soon or something against her? Like, that's the friction.
Maybe. I don't really know what I'm saying. I guess I'm just
maybe I
thinking
misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were kind of saying maybe if we watched her get out of the car, but maybe I misunderstood.
It doesn't necessarily have to specifically be that. It just seems like a very kind of offhand the way the whole thing is handled, which is funny, but it kind of is a very brief part of the movie, as opposed to, I'm kind of imagining like an alternate movie that is maybe more in depth, kind of following their somewhat naive attempts to actually implement all these ideas, whereas so much of the movie is just them discussing the ideas with each other. And again, maybe that's just me looking for what is kind of lost when you don't focus on narrative so much, which could be superficial things like, just being invested in the characters or just a kind of momentum as the movie goes on. But I do think sometimes those superficial things, are there for a reason. And this might have had more of an impact with what it's trying to discuss with the ideas, maybe, if I was seeing it illustrated more, as opposed to just little glimpses. Like, the closest it comes is the whole assassination thing. And it is, it does have that effect. It is funny the way she just kind of comes back to the car and is like, I think I was looking at the room number upside down. He's like, yeah, we'll go back in. So maybe more like, I'm okay with how they handled it. I just would have liked even more of that.
Yeah. I think that, I think one of the things about the sort of, I don't know what you said exactly, but there is like an aloofness almost about the characters in a way, and the presentation sometimes. And I think that comes in part from the idea that in this kind of revolutionary politics, theory and praxis are supposed to be the same. I'm going to say something that's wrong, but like the idea that, okay, so it's important that we watch them take the vote about whether to commit violent acts, right? And I think that once they take that vote, because of their commitment to this cause, that committing the violence is not a new feeling to her, because she's so part of it that once they take the vote, she's just like, well, that is now my role, is to commit. We took the vote. The guy in the yellow sweater left the group because he voted against where we were going. And so I have no nervousness about this. I have no new feelings about this, because we've decided that this is what we're going to do. So like getting out of the car to go do it is the same as, say, like a scene where we watch them in the street handing out the red book to like truck drivers and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
It requires you to have more faith in her than I did, I guess, to think
that view of it. Yeah. I totally understand the feeling of that these characters are sort of play acting, but I don't think they are in the world of the movie, but I also almost feel like it's immaterial. That's a hard one to answer because the movie is so aware of itself, and because the movie is also about performance, and the movie is also like, there's a line where Leod says, "I wish I was blind because then we would talk to each other differently," which is just a way of saying,
I loved that.
Yeah, it's so great. Which is just a way of saying that, like, our senses affect each other. And of course, it's an incredibly important thing to say because he's really talking about sound and image, which is what film is. And that's something that Godard talked about a lot as he made the movies that came after this, was figuring out a new way to use sound. He and Goran talked a lot about that, I think, was that they had to break down their understanding of what sound in cinema was in order to make revolutionary films. And so I was happy to see a sort of germ of that idea in this movie.
So I love that you can continually go micro macro with this movie. I think that's the thing. You can be a totally, regardless of how you feel about the characters and their beliefs and their politics in a vacuum, is one level of it. And then there is like a zoom out level of, you can clearly see that this is a movie about communication and like the frustrations of communication, and like both in the film conventions of what he's doing and with what they're doing, the frustration of misunderstanding and like not being able to get through to the point where they are like, we don't even, I wish we were a different way so that we could communicate a different way because we still can't get there or something. I love that about it.
Which is maybe a great segue into British Sounds, which is a movie where the opening scene is very much about sound, where you're watching a long dolly shot down a factory, a car factory construction line, and you're hearing loud drills and the screeching sounds of car manufacturing as someone reads a communist text.
Yeah, you can barely make out what the voiceover is saying. It is so loud in there.
Right. Which I think is important. Is deliberate, and I think he even said, and this isn't, we could all gather this just from watching it, but he said, like, I think they even wanted it to be loud when the movie was presented, and they were basically saying, if the workers have to hear this, why don't you have to hear this? If the workers spend their time with the sound all day long, and none of them even have like earplugs in or anything. And so whether or not that works for you or not, or whatever that means, you see a clear effort to try to figure out a revolutionary framework, or at least a political minded framework for how to use sound and image in a way that will get an audience to engage with these radical politics and engage with a new way of watching movies, which is another reason why I think that to dismiss those movies as just polemical and didactic misses the point, because they're also investigating how to make movies. And so just the same way we might say that we can understand the formal innovations of Birth of a Nation without subscribing to its politics, I think you can do that with these movies. Like, you can watch what they're trying to figure out, and you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. And you can be an artist too, in which I think that's also often a miscommunication, where it's like, why is this artist going to this subject matter? Like, is he so passionate about this subject matter? Is he a communist? I'm sure was like the constant like dialogue going on, for instance. But like, regardless of the piece, right, or the artist, it's really, they need material. As an artist, you need material, and you need and you gather that material and you build something out of it, and it's like whatever is most malleable, right, and whatever is like you can really feel fired up and workable. It's not always this thing that there's like this I am on fire for this specific message that I'm spilling out because I chose this material.
Which I think he was, and I think he genuinely was, and I don't think he was a phoney, even though or
at least just in the way of like, oh, I got a new girlfriend and she got me, I'm just excited about what she's excited about, which is very, I can feel that.
That's a normal thing. That's a totally normal tendency. Yeah. If I dated Anne Wierzemski, I'd be into what she was into.
I'd be like, yeah, whatever you say.
But so in British Sounds, which is a movie in 5 parts, maybe, where first we have the car assembly line, which we should just kind of note is a very nice kind of reference to the famous long tracking shot of the traffic jam in Weekend. We get another long dolly shot of cars, but this time it's not a traffic jam of people going on vacation. It's a car being built.
Right. Very cool shot.
It's so great. It's so great. I could watch it and watch it and watch it. And where we're doing something very deliberate with the sound of both the synchronous sound of what's happening in the factory and another layer of sound, which is a text being read. And then we have a scene of a naked woman kind of like walking in and out of rooms in a house and going up and down stairs while a feminist text is being read, which was, I can't remember her name and I neglected to look it up, but it was a feminist writer who Godard commissioned to write an essay for the film, I think. And so,
of course, a model-esque woman, it would literally kill Godard to have anyone who's not perfectly Gazelle-like.
Right. And so, which is, I think that's a fair criticism of the way he uses women in his movie,
but not uninteresting,
Right.
With that layer of it.
And so that scene is the same as the first scene in a way, in that it's like watching watching an image that's essentially the same image. The way that we're watching a car construction line, we're watching a woman kind of go up and down stairs and in and out of rooms to no real purpose, it seems. We're not watching her like gather materials to bring into the room, where she's just like going up and down stairs and in and out of rooms.
She keeps forgetting her clothes.
What did I come down here for?
While a text that is not Godard or Goran's text is being read. So it's the same thing. Then we get like, I think the next one is like, we get this kind of young conservative guy addressing the audience in kind of a newscaster style, where he's just saying very, very retrograde things about, the conditions of workers don't matter. And, right.
Another quite familiar link to what you would see, on Fox News, or even one of the worst ones.
Wow, I didn't even really. Yeah, totally. Like this, it could be Tucker Carlson.
Exactly. Or even one of, I can't even remember what they're called now. Whatever that other news network is, that's even like has less of a veneer of objectivity than Fox News sometimes tries to have.
Is it like called like Newsmax?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And the same talking points and rhetoric not even changed really.
Right.
Like,
if you're not going to pull your weight, you're out.
It's about the
exactly.
It's about
here's
the
why
young
we don't
people,
like the blacks.
The young people don't want to work. The immigrants are taxing our social services. It's all the exact same things you could literally turn on right now. Hear the exact same thing in any country.
Which is, I'm always suspicious of like praise for a movie being like, oh, it's so relevant or whatever. Like I'm always like, I don't know if that really matters, but it does really feel like you could just do this now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you could find it, you could like, I don't know what factory we would go into. We wouldn't go into like a car factory because that's not a predominant industry anymore. But we'd go into an Amazon warehouse.
Sure. It's more just how little things have changed, maybe, as opposed to how, tapped into things the movie was necessarily.
And we'd get just an interesting result from the Amazon warehouse, because I was actually listening to a report about the Amazon warehouses and how they're very eerie. The sound is very eerie because it's so automated. So you just hear kind of like conveyor belts going and like robots kind of zzz, zzz, So you'd get it would be the opposite thing, where it's not screeching and drilling, but you'd still get like a really a great effect with a text read over the sounds of an Amazon warehouse as you watched workers, go pull things off shelves or whatever, or watched a robot arm pick things up off shelves
and not go to the bathroom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then what else do we have in this movie? After the feminist text, there's and then the newscaster guy. There's
we have the like hippie youth like art project. Very like my favorite part.
So these guys are like grating to me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
what they're doing is they're like rewriting a Beatles song, right? To like and giving like Maoist lyrics.
Yeah, they want to fit Mao and
you say Nixon, we say Mao.
Yeah.
But they're like very into like mid argument, and it's like the most like left circle tail spinning that I know I've like run into when we're just trying to like make a little decision about something that's not even that big or not even that important, but we're going to spend like, I'm sure they were there for hours just like talking about these little Beatles lyrics rather than actually figuring out like how they're going to protest and where they're going to be and what they're actually going to do,
The thing I find myself confronted with in that scene, though, is similar, Seth, to the way you were talking about feeling about the La Chinoise characters in a way, but I'm because they're annoying. But I'm also I want to respect their sincerity. Like they really mean it, like they're really genuinely trying to figure this out in a way that's kind of touching. Like that they like, they're not arguing with each other. They're just like, oh, maybe this word would be better there. And the other one's like, yeah, good idea. And I want to get over my own sort of, it's a little cringy, but as I watch it, I want to get over that.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. I'm just not giving them the benefit of the doubt. I guess that I just jumped to.
Well, where do you think that why?
I don't know. Maybe it's my own past experiences with these sorts of things. I guess.
Well, and it is all that we see from
lead
them.
towards like, oh, it's just. She's wearing sunglasses while she's inside. Just like does give some sort of like feeling like this is more for show or something in this situation than it could be, or I don't know. There's also like all kinds of layers going on with like they're setting themselves up where there's like the black woman is there in the circle, but is like definitely like not able to break through the circle. And I don't know. That just set my mind. You're right. I don't know these people. Neither of us do, I guess. And maybe they were perfectly like in line and really on fire to help people.
I don't think that I think that our suspicions of them are founded. They're not ridiculous it's not ridiculous for us to feel suspicious of them. I just find that because it's a long scene. And so I guess there's part of an act of viewing when you view something that's taking a long time. As someone who genuinely loves movies, my reaction is to figure out how to watch it, not to turn it off or walk away from it or be repelled by it, right? And so in order to, if I'm confronted with an extended scene of something, I guess like the example of this would be like Jean Dielman, right? Like the sort of like film 101 example, right? Would be like, if you have to sit there and watch this woman peel potatoes for a long time, you're going to start to figure out what to watch. You know what I'm saying? You're going to figure out a way to watch it that's interesting to you. And I think that what I mean is like, by watching them for a long time do this kind of silly, cringy thing, I have to find a way to watch it where I'm not just going like, what a bunch of dummies. And my way in is to feel like, well, they're genuine and they're naive, but they're sincere. And they're young people with a guitar, figuring stuff out and making signs. And again, this scene again is doing the same thing the other ones were, to go back to our conversation about sound, and which starts in La Chinoise with the thing Léode says that we all really love about I wish I couldn't see because we talk to each other differently. There's a text being narrated over top of it, which is talking about like film prints and what a reactionary film is. And it's talking about the relationship between how a film is produced, which is not to say the content inside the movie, but the actual, like how many, there's a thing in there. Do you remember this where it's like if you make a certain amount of prints of it, it becomes Gone with the Wind just by virtue of mass producing it, which I don't even know. I still haven't really unpacked what that means. That by like, so they're saying like, I think the idea was if you have a film with, I'm paraphrasing and maybe getting it wrong, but if you have a film that has revolutionary content, but then mass produce prints of the film, it no longer is a revolutionary film. Maybe that's what it's saying. I'm not sure.
It's yeah, I hear that. It's a cool thing to say. It's a cool example to give, I guess.
But I think that's what Godard and Goran are doing in all these movies. But a lot, especially. Oh, and we just to bookmark it. There's also a long scene of like a workers' meeting, where he's doing the same thing with. If I remember right, he's doing the same thing with the camera we talked about last Chinoise, where he's going back and forth, and he's not doing it to capture who's talking. He's just going back and forth. Am I right about that?
I think so.
It's like a group.
They're talking about like capitalism, political parties, the working class, all this stuff, but they're like the actual workers, who are.
They're also talking about very specific things about work on an assembly line, which is not what we see at all in a movie like La Chinoise, where it's students talking about theory. We're talking about guys who actually know how to put a car together.
Yeah, and that's the scenes with them and the scenes with the hippies, really, for me, my way in was really just as like a historical document, seeing like the real people in the heat of it actually talking about this stuff like as an everyday concern. That's
same. Again, regardless of how genuine I feel the people are or not, or how correct they are or not, that was like, whoa, that's a brand new Beatles album right down there that they're listening to,
Exactly.
Like,
seeing them actually
document.
there right after the White Album came out, and just soaking in the milieu. I do find a lot of movies, from the 60s and stuff that even if I'm not crazy about the movie, it's just like, oh, wow, I'm spending all this time in 60s New York. Or,
or like you see a movie marquee in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, goes a long way.
Yeah, it's great.
But I do wonder, though, why Godard thought it was a good idea with this limited runtime to spend so much time with these hippies doing song parodies with the White Album. Like, was there no... I'm not really sure if I see a great justification for that in, like, the whole of the piece as it necessarily being warranted, or if he had a great idea for it. Maybe
because I wasn't sure if he was being hard on him, like maybe too hard on him,
You think, like by virtue of what? Like
I don't know, just like because
like only showing that,
right.
He's not showing anything.
Just like, I didn't know if he was being like picking on the kids or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Which I do think is not the move. I don't think we should be picking on these kids necessarily. But
or it's similar to what we were saying about La Chinoise to kind of like continue to try to drive home my idea about these movies not being that different from each other, which is that he's just watching.
Yeah,
and by this point we should we should keep saying that it's Godard and Goran at this point, not just Godard, but that he's not. I get a feeling in British Sounds especially, but in a lot of those films, that what he's doing is very it is anthropological. It is a true attempt to understand something, and when you're making a true attempt to understand something, just like in our conversation right now, we'll wander around. We'll like talk until we find the thing we meant to say, or we'll talk. I'll talk and talk, and then realize I don't know what I'm trying to say, and ask you to help me out, or ask you what your opinion is. I feel like that's what this kind of filmmaking is. It's a conversational filmmaking. Which, as I say that, I realize that what we said before about how people hate these movies because they're supposedly so didactic. And didactic is that's the opposite of conversational, right? But there is a conversational nature to these movies, and that he's just kind of like, well, what if I took this text and put it over this image? Well, do we have anything there? What's that? You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's not controlled. It's not an essay in the way that we could particularly or conventionally understand as what an essay to be, which is you have a thesis and you have a conclusion.
Yeah, and
it's
parts...
not that he is totally just like, oh well, we'll never get to the bottom of this and this is meaningless or something, or it's just like I am just like totally removed. I think he is like he's going gung-ho and has like an optimism of like maybe, who knows, at the end of this maybe the revolution will start and we will get to the bottom of this. Just like in an almost kind of sweet optimistic way.
I think so.
Speaking of wandering around, we didn't really give a lot of context for exactly what British Sounds is, in that
that's true.
It was shot for television, and which a lot of full frontal nudity first. I guess something that might have actually had a chance of getting shown on London
weekend
television.
Godard had a pattern of getting television commissions and then turning in something that was completely unairable.
Yeah, and this was not aired, obviously.
Yeah,
gotcha, guys.
Right.
Yeah, it is in English, which is interesting. It's appropriate.
Yeah, it's fun to watch him in this milieu.
Yeah, and it's only 54 minutes, so if it does sound interesting to anybody, it's something.
Yeah, no excuses.
It definitely doesn't take a lot of time to get through. I think that definitely helps too, because even though I did have a tougher time with this than with La Chinoise, the fact that it is shorter and it's definitely experimental, like you were breaking it down to the different parts that make it up. Maybe one
it's
part
like a pamphlet almost, or like a manifesto where like you're not gonna you don't want to overload it. You want it to be something you can carry around.
Sure. So if you don't like spending time with the hippies, there is the cool 10-minute tracking shot at the beginning. Right. And if you think maybe the part with the naked woman and the feminist text is maybe a little half-baked in conception or execution, we do have
we won't stay there. Yeah.
There is that asshole, whoever's giving the fake news broadcast, that kind of snaps you back into things we'd recognize in the present day. So it does feel a little bit like a grab bag to me, and maybe that's just kind of baked into he's doing experiments here. And when you're doing experiments, you're going to have a bunch of different ones. Maybe some work better than others, unless maybe your perspective is just the fact that since they are experiments, they're all kind of equal. I guess that's kind of the double-edged sword sometimes with these. If he is having a conversation and just trying things out, doesn't mean if it's always going to land. And that's just going to depend on the viewer.
I think that Godard and Goran talked about these movies as an attempt to figure out a new way to make movies. So they weren't even saying this is the new way to make movies. They were saying this is doing the work to figure out how to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Literal experiments, like a scientist. Yeah, it's like having some breakthroughs, having some setbacks.
Which is a totally Marxist idea, is to use a scientific analysis method to figure out how to treat the ills of society. So it makes complete sense that that's what they would do. I mean, it's interesting to think about these movies as a form of science, because they do feel loose and scattered. But I'll always take that over a packaged product, that feels sort of antiseptic and planned in a lab. You know what I mean?
Right. A lot more rare that actually really does for real do what it was apparently doing. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't feel like when you said experiment, it makes me think of that idea of the umbrella of experimental film, which is just like, just full of indulgence, which is, you know what I mean? Like the idea of experimental film is often like just kind of screwing around. Maybe not, but that's sometimes how it can feel,
Oh yeah, I definitely see it that way.
I prefer the screwing around. I think that's like a better way. That's what you hope for, I think, rather than I think the more prevailing idea from people, at least on the outside, or some of the ones that you do see, which wind up being bullshit for me, are the ones where it feels like somebody was just really feeling themselves too much here and just like did not, I don't know. Yeah, was not playing around, was not trying things, but like too certain or something. Yeah, like exactly. And that goes in like conventional Hollywood or fucking minimalist experimental films.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, I mean, there were a lot of different films we could have chosen to kind of represent this particular period. I think that we went with a good one. I haven't seen any others, but I mean, how long did this period last, would you say, Nathan? Like,
I think, well, let's just get it right. Why not? But I think Tout va bien was the last. Tout va bien is 1972. And that's a movie that Godard and Goran made together with Jane Fonda and Yves Montand, and it's about a wildcat strike in a factory. Wildcat strike meaning it's not like an authorized strike where the union has tried to come to an agreement and then threatens a strike and then eventually says, okay, we're going on strike unless you meet our demands. A wildcat strike is more just like, we're going on strike right now. And
it's funny. I just watched that this morning, like for the first time, and I loved it. Like,
it's great.
It doesn't feel to me that different from the, his movies that, had come a few years earlier. Like there's still it definitely feels like there's characters in a story and stuff up to a point.
And it's very funny.
That's a saving grace. It's like you can kind of get away with anything if you just make it like stimulating and it makes you laugh.
And it's very in the it's very in the tradition of sort of like that set is really great.
Absolutely.
And it's like the set in Jerry Lewis's Ladies' Man or something, where it's like, and of course there's a link between Godard and Jerry Lewis with the Cahiers critics championing him. So you asked about the period. Mm-hmm. So and there is stuff in the histories about how Godard, I hope I'm not getting the timeline wrong, but Godard was in a horrible motorcycle crash at some point. And I think that a lot of people say that Tout va bien is maybe more Jean-Pierre Goran's movie than it is Godard's.
Mm.
That he did a lot. He may have been sort of the driving force of that movie. Perhaps that's immaterial, but I just it's nice for him to get his due. Oh, and before we wrap up, I should say, I don't know when you're going to air this, but on November 21st, I'll be back home in Los Angeles, and I'm going to be at the Billy Wilder Theater, which is at the Hammer Museum. It's part of the UCLA Film and Television Archive. I'm going to be introducing La Chinoise with Jean-Pierre Goran in person, and we're going to have a conversation after the movie.
Oh man,
if anybody's in LA and can come to that and watch me sweat bullets while I try to be chill in front of Jean-Pierre Goran, you can please show up. It's free. The Billy Wilder Theater is always all films are free there. There you have the period, like from, mm-hmm. I think Weekend is 67, right?
Mm-hmm.
Weekend and La Chinoise are 67, I think. And then you have the stuff that he did with Goran and others. I should know their names, but there are other people in that collective besides Goran, but I think they were kind of the two. So it's just like 4 or 5 years.
And he obviously kept making movies for many decades after that, which I also haven't seen. Yeah. But I do still get the impression that those movies still, a lot of them stay in this kind of essayist, collagist, non-narrative
There's
mode
another
regardless.
movie I'd like to. Sorry to interrupt. There's another movie I'd like to recommend. So after those movies, he met the woman who became his partner for the rest of his life, Anne Marie Melville, who's also a filmmaker and sort of a video artist, so, it's interesting. Like you can see Godard's career just in terms of like Anna Karina, Anne Wyazemski, and Anne Marie Melville. He had a thing for Annes and Annas, huh?
Don't we all?
So what was I trying to say? Oh. He finished a movie with her that he had tried to start making with Goran about Palestine, which for obvious reasons I recommend. It's called Here and Elsewhere, or Ici et Ailleurs. I'm probably murdering that, but that I highly recommend. And it's in the same vein as the movies as like British Sounds, where it's essayistic. But I highly recommend that one. And there's also a documentary that you can find, I think, on YouTube, about Goran and Godard touring the United States. They went on a speaking tour of the United States in order to raise money to make their Palestine movie. And you can see them planning the Palestine movie in that documentary. And then they never finished it together. But then you can go and you can find it, on like Internet Archive or something, here and elsewhere. I'm lucky enough to live in a place that has video stores that have it. But shout out to Videotech in Highland Park. But I highly recommend that movie in terms of like where to go after these.
Okay, yeah. So basically, I mean, in a way, it sounds like the rest of his career was, you could still find things that would be, provocative and divisive. I mean, pretty much stopped. All the way through. Like, it's not like he ever went really back to more normal movie making after this.
No, I mean, there's a movie called Slow Motion or Every Man for Himself that was from 1980, I think, that was sort of hailed as he's back. He's making a normal movie again, with Isabelle Huppert and Natalie Baye, who are both, of course, terrific in everything, and Jacques Dutronc, who's really cool. That's terrific. And then he also was doing, throughout his career, he did lots of he was excited about video. There's a movie called Numero Deux that's really interesting that he made with Melville, that's experimenting with video and showing lots of different screens at one time. I haven't seen it in a very long time, so I can't talk intelligently about it.
And he was doing stuff with 3D, which I'll probably never get a chance to actually see in 3D. Yeah, I would love to, though. That's why I've kind of haven't watched Goodbye to Language, because I want to see it, how people were able to see it at the time.
I got to see one of those. It came out right after we moved to Los Angeles from New York, and we saw it at the Aero Theater, which is one of the best theaters in LA, and just one of the best theaters, period. I had trouble with that one. I couldn't really engage with it. But of the later era, sort of senior Godard, I really love Notre Musique. I think that's terrific. And that's from maybe 2000. I mean, at this point, it's over 20 years old, but it still feels like part of the last act. I mean, his career was so long, but it feels kind of like part of the last act of his movies. And it's another sort of essayistic movie made up of a lot of clips of other movies. There's this huge documentary about movies that he made called History of Cinema. That's terrific. That's all just sort of commentary about movies where you're watching just clips of movies as he narrates them. I mean, they're all there. You can't. I really don't think you can go wrong. He's the best. He's the greatest.
I can't help feeling that I do think Weekend is a good starting point before you go into these ones. At least for me,
I love Weekend.
Yeah. It being that's one where you can kind of see that he's in this mode, and it's not necessarily that one. There's less political anything going on.
He's
I remember
just sort
watching
of
it,
terrorizing the bourgeoisie in that movie.
Yeah, I just remember watching it in my early 20s, where most of that stuff, if it is in there, would have gone over my head anyways. I just had fun with it being just a gonzo, wild experience, which I think goes a long way. Just having that with grain of salt with these movies, going into these, I think is that part of that is still going on here.
Yeah. I think we're saying the same thing, which is just that these movies are considered a break, and they're considered something that you can just kind of overlook and not care about, even if you do care about Godard or care about the history of movies. And I just think that it's time to correct that, because I think it's inaccurate, and I think that the reasons given for overlooking these movies are really misguided reasons.
All right. Well, on that note, I want to thank you, Nathan, for...
Thank you. And don't forget, everybody, to buy the book, Realpolitik. It's out now. It's published by Drawn and Quarterly. It's spelled REEL, like a film reel. And then politic is spelled with a K, not with a C.
Yes. And is there a preferred, place you would like them to get it from, or way for them to buy it?
The best thing you can do for the book, if you want to support the book, is go to a store and ask about it. because if they don't have it, you're telling them about it, and then maybe they'll get it. So that's the greatest thing you can do for the book. The worst thing you can do just generally is order books on Amazon, so don't do that. But anything in between those two is fine.
All right. And I really enjoyed it. I especially for anyone listening, if you're really into movies, it feels very lived in as far as, there's jabs at Letterboxd. They abduct they hijack the Criterion Closet van at one point.
I always forget that. That should be like the first thing I say about the book is that they hijack the Criterion Closet van, because that's like everybody's favorite thing. And
it very much evokes 2024 too, with it bringing me right back to like the election and Megalopolis. There's some discussion of something we've covered on this podcast. That was the fun thing about doing it every day, is the ability to kind of react to things in real time, if I wanted to. All right, cool. Well, then you told us about the screenings and stuff you have coming up. Was there anything else you wanted to throw out there while you have the ear of the nation?
Thanks for doing this, and thanks for letting me talk about these movies that lots of people don't care. People care about Les Chinoise, I think, but I really appreciate it, and it was fun to do.
All right.
We're not on watch.
Yes, no one watches here. So, all right, power to the people.
All right, thanks, guys.
And all that shit.
Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti, hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchablespod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.